become better. And again, welcome to These Place. Raised in Southern California in a family with a rich heritage in art, music, and education, Pastor Speirs brings her upbringing, her love for God, and her sensitivity from her life's experiences to her career as a pastor and head administrator for the church. The Reverend Susan Elizabeth Speirs currently practices her ministry at St. Luke Episcopal Church in Idaho Falls, where she has been the rector for 5.5 years. Pastor Speirs completed her 3-year Master of Divinity degree at Seminary of the Southwest in Austin, Texas, an accredited Episcopal seminary. She was ordained an Episcopal priest at Church of the Holy Comforter in Charlotte, North Carolina in 2000. Previously to her life as a priest, Pastor Susan was a public and private school educator in the area of art education in Eugene, Oregon, and in Eaglewood, Colorado for 15 years. Within St. Luke's Episcopal Church, Pastor Susan Speirs has an all creatures, great and small, pet cemetery. Also, a plaque that recognizes all family pets who have passed away. In addition, there is a memorial wall featured in her church for all former members who have passed away. Susan Speirs and her husband E. Lawrence Speirs reside in Idaho Falls and visits their 3 children and 3 grandchildren who live in North Carolina, Colorado, and California whenever possible. It brings me great privilege to present to you Pastor Susan Speirs. So, Pastor Susan, how old were you when you heard the call of ministry?
You know, Donovan, that's a hard thing to even say, because in looking back, I think probably the call on my life came when I was about 5 years old.
5 years old.
The first time I realized that there was something other than myself and recognized it as God.
So was it a dream, or did someone come to you and...
Actually, somebody came to me and took me. My mother was filling out some paperwork for us to join a new church.
Okay.
In Phoenix, Arizona. And there was an older woman there, and she said, "Would you like to see the church?"
Mm-hmm.
And it was the cathedral in Phoenix, Arizona. And I said yes, and I looked at my mother to see if it was okay. And she said, yeah, that's fine. So we went in there, and I remember holding her hand. Mm-hmm. And I remember the piece from Scripture, and I don't know if she said it to me or if it's just in my mind, but coupled with this experience, I remember I was glad when they said unto me, "We will go into the house of the Lord." And as I said, I looked around in all this beautiful stained glass and everything that was there, and recognized that I was in the presence. Mm-hmm. I know now it was God, but I didn't know what that was at first, but I was very aware that there was something really good, and it was more and larger than myself. But my actual call to the priesthood really happened one day when I was in my 40s, believe it or not.
Okay.
I had been teaching school. I was a private and public art teacher.
Okay.
And I had lived in Oregon for a long time, and then I moved to Colorado and was living in Colorado and teaching school. And I've always been involved in the church. You know, a lot of people kind of go away, and I have had times where in my faith life I haven't been as devout as other times before I was a priest, but those times are very few. When I went to college, I didn't drop out of church. I still went to church.
You kept going.
So,
you kept
yeah,
going.
I did. And when I was first married and young, we both went to church together, and everything was surrounding the church. And so I was used to doing everything in the church, but nothing up around the altar, believe me. Okay. And in fact, I was even nervous if I had to make an announcement about the Ladies Quilt Guild or something like that. That I would have to practice a long time. I would be shaking.
So answering the call was very frightening for you.
Yes.
I was imagining, because they would have brought you in front of a lot of people. So I'm sure
Right.
answering that call was a nervous thing.
It
for
was
you.
big. Yes, it was. It was scary, as you said. It was frightening, and I didn't even realize I had a call. I think you can go along doing your life, and I think God is always with us, and I think that God applauds all the goodness and everything that we give out of ourselves to humanity. But I was feeling a deeper urge for something, and I didn't know what it was.
Okay.
I couldn't name it.
Okay.
So what I did was I began to write. I began to journal, and I read lots of books. And I had a friend that was also a teacher, and she and I became prayer partners. We met once a week at the church, and we would say prayers together. And my talking with her would always end up being something about, well, I still feel like I'm supposed to be doing something, but I don't know what God wants from me.
And it's interesting that you brought that out, because a lot of people go through that. What am I supposed to do? What is my gift? What is my call? And they go on, they go through many years of trying to figure out what this is. And so,
Right.
so what was the final straw for you that helped you to realize that I'm called to be a pastor?
Well, it comes a little at a time,
Okay.
but I will say there was a specific moment.
Okay.
I decided I should see a spiritual director.
Okay.
Now, a spiritual director is somebody that is usually licensed to listen to you and to listen to God at the same time. And they're usually educated in that field, and their understanding is very deep in the faith life. And it's not just in the Episcopal Church where I reside. Lots of people have soul friends or spiritual directors that maybe aren't certified, but there's somebody that they're used to talking to, and they share their deepest desires with. So I met this woman at a retreat for our church, and I was on the deciding board of the church then, and that's called a vestry in the Episcopal Church. And I went up to her. She was there as a guest speaker, and I went up to her and asked her if she would be willing to take me on as a directee, since she was a spiritual director, and I knew that. And she
So is that
said
the same
yes.
thing as a mentor?
It's kind of like a mentor, like a spiritual mentor,
Okay.
yeah. So she gave me her telephone number, and it took me a year to call her.
Oh, wow.
So I called her one day, and because I just couldn't stand it. Something was just pushing me. And so I called her, and she said she had been waiting to hear from me.
Oh, wow.
So that was, gave me the idea that I was on the right track.
Okay.
So I made an appointment, and it was in when I was living in Colorado, and it was a very snowy day, and I was in my Jeep Sport, and I was driving all around with all my artwork and everything from school, still in my car, and I kept getting lost going up in these hills. I finally made it to her house, and I was like an hour late, but she still said, "Please come in."
Okay.
And so we went to this room that she had that was special, and she lighted a candle, and we talked. And I said, I feel a need to deepen my faith somehow, but I don't know what's next.
Okay.
And I continued to talk to her and about these things, and she was very compassionate and open. But then all of a sudden I said, sometimes I think about becoming a deacon or a priest or something. And I had never said anything like that in my entire life.
Wow.
And I stopped talking. I wasn't able to speak. I said, not like that, that.
Right. Okay.
So it was in that moment that my entire life, in that one moment, my entire life took a turn. And it felt like cement had been lifted off of my shoulders.
Wow. Okay.
So it was a very powerful moment. I asked her if she thought I was crazy, because I was feeling a little bit like maybe I'm off my rocker here. And she said,
and was that because you felt that you just weren't capable
Right.
of doing the work, or?
there is no way. I wouldn't have ever dreamed that. It was as if the words came out and my thoughts weren't connected even. And I really think it was the Spirit sort of moving me along. Yeah, I didn't think I was capable. I didn't think I was smart enough. I didn't think I was worthy enough. I didn't think I was good enough. There are all those things that I think we all consider. And this was very different because when I went into teaching, I sort of sat down and made a list of pros and cons and made a decision about what I would do with my education.
Okay.
And I stopped in the middle and had a couple of kids. But then when I went back to school, I knew exactly what I was doing and what my hopes and dreams were. But with this, it was completely out of control. Already, I was saying things that I didn't even know that I could associate with.
So you answered the call. How did your husband feel about this call?
My spiritual director, Helen,
And being a
was with me.
female
Yes.
in ministry, and perhaps, I know we haven't gotten into,
Right.
but even the aspect of gender and how gender plays a role in ministry or answering the call. And so I believe at the time you were married at the time.
I was married to my high school sweetheart.
Okay.
We were married for about 29 years then.
Oh, okay.
Something like that, about 28.
Before you answered
Before I answered
the call. 29 years, wow.
Yeah. When I told my husband what was happening, I said, I've been journaling a lot lately. And you know that I went to see Helen, the spiritual director.
Okay.
And at first I told him he had to turn off the TV. Because I needed his
You
full
wanted his full
attention.
attention. Yeah, it was something big.
This was big. And it was really hard for me to say this.
Okay.
And I said, I'm thinking about, he said, you want to be a deacon? He knew it was something with the church.
Okay.
And I said, no.
Now, was he now what church were you going to?
The Episcopal Church.
Now, was he an active
He
member?
was active, but he was active in a sort of peripheral way.
Okay.
I would say that he loved the church, but I'm not sure what his relationship with God was exactly.
Okay, I understand.
It was different than mine, and he was
Okay.
a very private person.
Okay.
So he said, you want to be a priest? And I said, yes, and don't you try to stop me. And he said, I wouldn't dare question that.
Okay.
So he was very cognizant that God might be doing this.
Okay.
I want to say something about my call, though, because the thing that you mentioned earlier about women in ministry
Yes.
is huge. And
And matter of fact, is here on Dee's place, conversing back and forth, there's a lot of women out there, that are confused and perhaps maybe have felt like they missed the call because of their gender. And so please elaborate further concerning that issue.
yeah, it continues to be an issue. A lot of the time we think that women have really made strides in every area, but ministry is a little different than other things and in other businesses because what people really want, if you ask them, even in churches where there is a woman minister or ordained person, if you ask them what would be their the thing that they desire most in a pastor,
Okay.
what they would look like. They want somebody in their mid-30s with a family, a guy with, 2.5 kids and a dog. And I know I don't fit any of those things, and a lot of women, I think, fear even going into the ministry, and there are some churches that don't even allow women to preach at all or speak in the church because of things that are in the Bible,
Right.
which Paul said. And
Which
we
Paul
know,
says, I believe women are to remain silent
right.
in the church, and so.
Actually, Paul didn't say that, but
Okay.
but some people
Okay.
that were surrounding Paul and wanted to push that agenda forward,
Okay.
just like nowadays,
Mm-hmm.
said those things, and Paul is credited with them, and that's okay. It really doesn't matter who said it.
Right.
What was happening was a specific local thing, and what happens sometimes is we globalize these things, and we think that they're for everybody. Yes, it is the living Word of God in the Bible. But we also have to pay attention to the fact that in this particular case where Paul is credited with saying women should be silent, there was a lot going on in that
Sure.
particular community.
Sure.
And we all have our particular communities. This problem with women in ministry is sometimes so subtle, though, because when someone is applying for a job for a church, in our church, for instance, it has to be a call. The
Okay.
church itself matches itself with a person,
Okay.
and it's actually a pretty fair way to do it, because what you don't want is somebody that has ideas about doing things one whole way, and the church wants to go a whole different direction in their vision. So you want the church and the person that's in the leadership position for the church to be matched well.
Okay.
Sometimes that's a man and sometimes it's a woman.
Okay.
And when this church realized that the last man in the call process, I think there were 3 of us left at one
Okay.
point.
Okay.
And in our church, it takes a long time to have somebody come into the process, and it takes about 18 months to 2 years to have a new position with the matched church.
Okay.
So, and you could be working, the pastor could be working at one church and be applying at other churches.
Okay.
So that happens sometimes. But we had about 3 people, and I think it was 3, they said. And I think the guy that was there, or maybe there were 4, the one guy backed out and went someplace else.
Okay.
So the committee that was saddled with this challenge came to the vestry, the deciding board of this church, and said, it looks like we're going to have a woman priest.
Okay.
Now, this was a new idea for some people here.
Oh, okay.
And some people, in fact, the head of our altar guild, and we're celebrating her retirement soon after 35 years at this church,
Okay.
said that she did not want a woman priest. That was the only thing that she was specific about.
Okay.
But she told me that she said that, and she said, after I got to know you a little bit, she said, I was really, really glad
Good.
that they chose you.
Good.
So,
Good. So now you are pastor, or the reverend of
Right.
the Episcopal Church. So how does your husband feel about this transition for you now? And this,
well,
and this
as
calling?
I went off to seminary.
Okay.
And seminary in the Episcopal Church takes 3 years.
Okay.
It's kind of like going for a law degree or something. It's a lot more academic than I ever realized.
So did you go out of state, or
Yes.
or you had to be away from your family for about
Yes.
3 years? Okay.
And my children were actually on their own at that point.
Okay.
And one of them was in college, and the other one was in chef school.
Okay.
And so they were doing their thing. And here I was about to go off to college too.
Okay.
And to get a master's in divinity degree, which is what I earned, I had to have already had one degree. So my
Okay.
other degree was in art education
In
because
education,
I
right,
was
that you
teaching. And I had to leave teaching in order to do this. And it takes a lot of money to go to seminary. It costs about $100,000.
Oh, wow.
Fortunately, I had a lot of people that were willing to give money
To help you.
and I was able to be guided into how to get scholarships and things like that. And I went to a seminary that was very helpful.
Okay.
Don't ever think that you can't do it
Right.
because of money.
Okay.
I did have to wait a little bit. I had to wait another full year before I could enter seminary because it was expensive, as I said.
So, no matter how old you are or walk of life, you can go back to school. And Reverend Susan is a testimony of that. Okay.
Absolutely.
Yes, you can continue.
Yes. Unfortunately, my husband at the time, and when I graduated, we had been married about 30 years.
Okay.
And I was unaware that he was, well, I'll just say he wasn't as supportive in his attitude about my becoming a priest as I thought he was going to be.
Okay.
Since we had met in youth group in the church when we were in high school,
Okay.
I assumed that he was going along with all of this.
Okay.
He was going along with me going to school, but he didn't marry a priest.
Okay.
And I don't think that was his idea of a wife after I graduated seminary.
Okay.
The problems began with my being gone long hours,
Okay.
my being devoted to my vocation.
Okay.
And I still loved him. There wasn't a situation where we were battling this out. Unfortunately, as I said before, the subtle things just keep occurring. And I remember one day I got home from church. It was about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And he was furious at me. And I said, "What is the problem?" And he said, "I made lunch and I have been waiting for you and you didn't even call." Well, I was with somebody that was dying
Okay.
and holding the hand of the family member. And it was a very crucial moment. I didn't have time to, excuse me, I put my stuff down and call my husband, tell him I'm going to be late for lunch. But his idea of a husband and wife had been different because I had been a teacher and I had, my summers were free. I did a lot of things with the house. This was a whole different way of living.
Wow.
And actually I was the one that finally said to him, at dinner one night when we were out, maybe we should think about a trial separation. And
Is that something that the
we had never
Episcopal
done
Church, what was some of the criticism perhaps
Yeah.
that you received from the church? Because you're a pastor now, correct?
Right, and I was in a big church in North
Okay.
Carolina,
Okay.
and I was the associate rector, so that
Okay.
meant that I was the assistant top clergy person in a big church. The church had about 1,700 people,
Okay.
and I was, there was a man that was the rector, and I was the assistant rector.
Okay.
And I did a lot of the work. There was also a deacon there, so I did a lot of the work with the head person there, and we did a lot of things in tandem. And like I would preach every other week, and I would take as many hospital calls as he did, and so I was working pretty darn hard. And my husband was one thing, but then parishioners, when I separated from my husband and got my own place, at first the rector was pretty strict with me. He wouldn't let me tell anybody.
Oh, I see.
And that was kind of strange because I felt like I was living a lie.
I see.
So that the parish didn't think anything bad of him or me. He just wanted it So I kept talking to him. See, even right within the clergy itself, there was some of this tension.
I see.
And I asked him if I could talk to the parish or write a letter to the parish. And he kept making me wait and wait and wait. Finally, he said, I think it's time, after about 6 months. Now, some people by then had noticed that I had an apartment. So I think they were putting 2 and 2 together. Probably.
So are you still separated at this time, or are you divorced at this time?
We were not divorced. We were separated.
Okay.
And I didn't know that we would get a divorce.
Okay.
Divorce was not a word in my vocabulary.
So you eventually got a divorce.
Yes, and we did, because I could see that it wasn't going to end up in a good way.
Right. So it's important to say then, or to note that whether it's the husband or the wife, if one accepts the call into the ministry, that is very important that both agree and are on the same page, because issues can arise as a result of...
I wish you had been around and said that to me then. I did have one friend that said to me as I was getting ready for seminary, Susan, you better ask him if he's really supportive of what you're doing, because I see signals that say that he's not.
I see.
And I think I was probably in denial.
I see.
I did try to talk to him about it one time after she said that, but I couldn't really get him to come around to being as open as I wanted. But I think the hardest part for me was that I went to seminary in another state, and I came home on vacations and so forth. But I went in another state, and I became acclimated to the community that I was living in. I had my own apartment. I went to school every day. It was very intense. I studied really hard, but I don't think that I realized how much you give up in your personal life.
I see.
So I didn't choose that on purpose, though. I didn't go off thinking, okay, now I'm going to be doing this by myself, and won't this be fun? Right. My husband looked for a job down there. I went to Austin, Texas for seminary, and we were actually living in Nebraska at that point, but I was from the Diocese of Colorado, and we tried for him to find a job down there, and there wasn't anything available.
Okay.
So, and it was necessary that he work in order to keep our household going, and he had a career as well.
So it's just tension after tension after tension, building and building.
Yeah, and a lot of it because I was studying so hard.
I see.
I don't think I paid as much attention to as I should have.
I see.
We did end up going to 3 different counselors.
Okay.
It's not like we didn't try.
I understand.
We had kids, and by now I had a granddaughter, and I had always seen that we would be together forever and ever.
So how many children do you have?
I have 2 children.
2 children, okay.
Grown, and I have 2 grandchildren.
Okay.
And
so how did your children feel about you accepting the call into ministry, and perhaps the tension perhaps between your husband and yourself, in answering the call?
Sure.
How did your children feel about that? Were there issues with your children as a result of it?
My kids were, although they weren't always involved as much in the church as I was,
I see.
They affirmed what I was doing, and they thought it was a great idea. And later on, well after I graduated from seminary, they said that they thought it was wonderful, and I didn't know this at the time. They thought it was wonderful that at that stage in my life I chose to go to graduate school, to drop everything and follow. And all I can say is I don't feel like I had a choice.
I see.
I got to a point where my call was the most vivid thing that there was. It wasn't that it was in opposition to my marriage or the rest of my life. It was just very clear to me that that's what I was supposed to be doing.
I see. So in your call, being a woman, experiencing divorce, how were the challenges even with your congregation, because you were an assistant at that time,
Right.
and then you became the pastor of, or the reverend
No,
of the church?
then I became the pastor of a church
Okay.
myself.
Okay.
Which is a pretty normal thing to do.
Okay.
I was an assistant for a little over 3 years, and then I
Okay.
became the rector of a church.
So when you finally then became a director of your own church, were you still divorced at that time, or
Actually, I was engaged.
you were engaged? Okay.
And I
So
thought,
there is second chances.
yes, there are definitely second chance. And I will tell you, I remember one day when the rector came in, and when I was the assistant, and I was really suffering because I was by myself, and I said, I hope I get to love somebody again. And he said, you will. And I didn't see it. I didn't see it, and I also didn't think that that was a possibility.
Okay.
And besides, I never saw myself getting married again.
Oh, okay. Why is that? Why?
I felt like I'd struck out.
Oh, I see.
I messed up.
I see.
I didn't
And there may
do
be people-
things according to the way you're supposed to.
Right. And there may be people who are listening, viewing, whether we don't know where they are, but perhaps feel the same way, you know, going through the same situation, whether it's a divorce or it could be drugs, or it can be anything, and people get stuck in the fall that they don't get back up,
Right.
you know. And so it's, you know, as you were saying, you know, you felt like, you know, this can't be for me again. You know, I messed up. It's over. But
It's over.
But
I cried a lot.
okay.
I cried a lot.
Mhm.
And I would rent movies at night, and when I normally would have been with my husband doing something
Mhm.
before, I'd rent movies and lie in bed and watch a movie, fall asleep, get up, go back to the church, try to do. And I was somehow able to keep my head above water as far as my job was concerned.
Well, you had a congregation, so I'm
Right,
sure
I didn't wanna let
people
them
were
down. Yeah.
dependent on you to be strong, and you know, you're the pastor or you're the reverend.
Well, when I finally got to write this letter,
Mhm.
the bishop actually wrote a letter to the rector because he got to see the letter. And he said it was the best letter like that he had ever read. And it was, I don't know exactly what he said. I probably have a copy of it. But whatever it was, all I could do was identify with the people in my congregation. And I said, sometimes those of us that are held up as the example
Right.
are in the same pain and are going through the same things that our parishioners are going through. And I explained somehow that I hoped to learn from it and hoped that they would forgive me for this part of my life and see me as a human being and not
Right.
as hold me up as just this person that could do no wrong, because clergy are human beings
Right.
first, you know, and sometimes people put onto us things that really we don't put on ourselves. But
Right. And I can relate to that, you know, living in Colorado as long as I did, you know, being a youth director, and, you know, all it's lights, camera, action, you know,
Right.
and everybody's watching, and, you know, and like you said, you know, some people put clergy on this pedestal as if they're perfect, and they
Right.
don't cry or they don't get lonely, and that's not true.
that's not true.
That's not true.
Because the higher they put you up, the farther you have to fall down.
Right. I always say that the higher you go, there's less oxygen at the top.
Yes.
It's hard
That's
to
for
breathe at the
sure.
top.
That is
and
for sure.
So
Yes.
but you're smiling again.
I'm smiling again. I have been married now the second time
Okay.
for 10 years.
Wow.
To a wonderful
Congratulations.
man, thank you. And he
Whom I had the
is-
pleasure of meeting earlier today.
And believe it or not, he is, at his stage of life, he is studying to be a priest.
Oh wow.
So he has a full-time job and he's studying to be a priest.
Wow.
So this is a very difficult time for him. And I have to help him a little bit because I remember how hard it was.
Right.
So.
Right.
But yes, I really encourage people if they have a call. It doesn't have to be a call necessarily to ministry. But I'm reminded of the fact that yesterday was what we call the Feast of the Annunciation, when the angel Gabriel came to Mary and told her that she was with child, and she would have this child, and his name would be called Jesus, and he would be the Son of God and be great. And she kept saying, well, how can this be? How can this be?
Right.
And finally, she accepted the call. She said, here am I, Lord, do with me what you will.
Right.
And I think that is where we need to go always, is we might push it away, or we might say it can't be for me, or this isn't possible. But I think in that same scripture, I think it talks about with God all things are possible.
Yes.
And I feel like my life is living proof of that. I didn't have a great growing up. I was a child in a household with where my parents didn't get along, and there was a lot of turmoil.
I see. Was perhaps aided in this not feeling good about yourself, or self-esteem issues.
Sure. For sure. And I was criticized a lot. Did not think I was capable of most things. I remember one time that the teacher told my mother that I was a good average student. And this was when I was in about 4th grade. And my mother told me that, and in a lot of ways that was very damaging to me. Because it didn't teach me to reach high for a long time.
I see.
But thank God I discovered the church, because my home life, I think, was not exceptional. The church was even more beautiful to me. And God's love for me, and all that I felt when I was with God's people. Those were the things.
Strength being among
the strength
people.
Was a family that wasn't my family of origin. It was my family of people that I met in the church.
LDS.
Yeah.
A community.
At least 70.
At least 70% LDS. So, how is life for you now, living in Idaho Falls, female pastor,
Right.
in a heavily in a community that is 70, 80, 90% LDS? How is life for you? Do you find criticism or difficulty here?
Well, again, I think it probably is subtle.
Okay.
Actually, I was asked one time to come over by a very nice Mormon gentleman and say a blessing at their preparedness, one of their preparedness fairs.
Okay.
And I had this guy is somebody that lives in the community, is Mormon, and who I've made friends with. I don't know, sometimes the things that I do, I guess, are once in a while on the edge. I asked him to come and preach at our church.
Okay.
And
was he received?
He was received.
Okay.
And I told him before some of the ways that we speak about things. And so he and I had a conversation, and the reason I did that was because I wanted him to be able to speak to these people and be received.
Okay.
No matter how things look, our call for all of us is to love one another, and I really believe that.
True.
It's very difficult sometimes.
And that's who God is. God is love. And
God is love.
If we are ambassadors of Him,
Right.
then that's what we should give to one another, love, because God is love. And so,
And I do
agree with you.
think Christians, especially in leadership, are challenged to push the envelope.
Sure.
Jesus
Okay.
did that, and I think that's what we're called to do.
Sure.
And so here I was, calling this guy up and asking if he wants to preach. And at an Episcopal church on a Sunday morning, 2 services no less. And he did, and he was very kind, and he came to our Sunday school class, and he has offered to help us start I've been thinking about a ministry with one of the schools that's near here with an after-school program. It's been a vision of mine for a while, and while it's slowly percolating in my mind, he says, you know, you tell me when and where, and I'll bring you some people to help. So, you know, I do think that while it is difficult to live in a community that is very different, I feel like I'm in the diaspora, you know, that like the Jews were in Babylon sometimes. Like, I feel like I'm surrounded by these people that worship in a whole different way than anything I was ever around before. I mean, I've been around people that were Mormon, but I didn't understand much about the faith until I knew they didn't drink coffee or Coke, but that was about all I knew. And so I started studying a little bit, and I do understand. I've read some of their materials. I think it's important that we educate ourselves and other people's understanding of God so that we can be smart about what we're saying. And my point is not to offend anybody, but to be able to defend what I have to say too. I think that it is very difficult for women in the LDS faith because my heart goes out to them. I do not feel like they are recognized as full members because they are not allowed to do some of the things that their male counterparts are allowed to do. And I think that's very sad.
So let me ask this question. So, being a female pastor here in Idaho Falls, Idaho, are there other female pastors here?
There are. There's one at the Methodist Church.
And you don't have to mention any names, but
yeah, there are, and I've talked to them a lot when we do have time together, which is, you know, few and far between. We do associate with each other. Yes, and they have some of the same. They have some of the same challenges that I do. I think that people have to get to know you before they give you their full
support.
As a woman pastor, I think it's more difficult for, I think, part of the male parishioners to take leadership from a woman until they see that they can trust that person.
I see. How do you see the world today?
Personally?
Yeah, as a pastor, as a reverend, and within this community, responsible for all walks of life that come through your doors. How do you see the world today? Do you see us getting better?
I see us.
Or worse?
I see us with a lot of problems on our hands, but with incredible potential. I think we live in the hope of always that we can make the world a better place. I think that's what we're charged with as members of God's family, is to be the hands and feet and hearts of Jesus in the world, to love one another, to make other people feel better, to make an investment in others' lives, to not, I wish we weren't so materialistic. I think that's a really hard thing in our society because I think it's made us selfish.
I see.
I would hope that people would learn that when they give, they want to give more. And I think we have great capacity, but we also sell ourselves short a lot of the time because we're too tired, too stressed, all of those things. I think if people would talk to each other a little bit more, it might help.
I know one of the things, I'm glad you said that, I know one of the things that was a motivating factor for myself, even with the creation of Dee's Place, is to bring awareness and to let people know, just as you said, that, not to be selfish, but to reach out to our brothers and sisters, and regardless of where they are in life and their lifestyle, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But we have a responsibility to exemplify love, and I believe God will be pleased. God is pleased with that. That when we do that, and not be so materialistic, as you said, the hustle and bustles and trying to keep up with the Joneses and neglecting our neighbors and our friends and our loved ones, trying to chase, something perhaps that may be temporary. But it's important that we, embrace and, as Jesus did, wash the feet of others, if you will, and I appreciate you saying that. So on that note, what is your definition, because definitely you are a woman of excellence, and you went through many things in your life and sacrifices, and you have a beautiful church, and what is your definition for someone who's out there that's lacking this? What is your definition of courage?
I'd say know your own beauty.
Okay.
Because God sees you as beautiful, and with nothing but goodness and potential. And not everybody will agree if you follow the call of what is on your heart. If you follow the call to be involved with something that maybe nobody around you is involved with, maybe you step out on your own. That shows the strength and character of God in the world. And the more of us that are able to do that, the more we see strength, and we demonstrate that to the younger ones in our society. It's my dream that we can minister to our children and to our youth. And one of the things that I do here at St. Luke's is we have something called Kids Club on Thursday nights, and I get to do some of the art things that I used to do with the children of this church. And then they also have music and a meal. But on Sunday morning, when they come up for communion and they put their hands out, they already have a relationship with me. And cool. I didn't realize it until one Sunday morning, one of them ran up and said, doesn't that look like something on my hand? And they were talking to me right in the line for communion, as if I was just their friend, you know. And I thought, these are the adults of tomorrow, and these are our youth group kids of tomorrow. This 6-year-old
our leaders, our pastors,
our leaders,
our presidents, etc., doctors, etc. And I believe that's very important, that you have that relationship with children, because it's so important to build the self-esteem of our children and of this generation. They're bombarded with so many issues, more so than when I was in school. And so it's important to build that confident level. And so as they grow, and as you well know, the struggles that you experience answering this call, and perhaps how long it took you to answer this call because of not feeling confident, if you will, in your ability. And so it's very important, and you're commended and to be celebrated for what you're doing with the young people and the children here, building their self-esteem.
I think that God sees us as beloved children.
Yes.
And our children don't quite understand that because it's an intellectual kind of thinking.
Right.
But if we as adults, especially those of us that are involved in leadership, can have a relationship with these kids at this stage, maybe they won't leave the church.
Right.
Maybe they'll bring their friends and come, and they're doing it now. My hope is that they'll just continue.
Continue.
Yeah.
Well, Reverend Susan, I thank you very much. Thank you so much for pouring your heart out to the viewers. We hope that something that was said today becomes an encouragement. You know, maybe you're out there today and you're feeling you're confused or you're frustrated and you feel this urge to move forward, but because of perhaps your gender or your color of your skin, etc., or some handicap, you feel as if you're not capable. But today we want you to know that you are capable of doing great things. And Reverend Susan here is a prime example of what it means to be courageous and to live through the sacrifices that took her, that made her what she is today. And so, Susan, Reverend Susan, thank you very much again for taking time to share with us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
You're welcome. And if you have any questions or any comments, please visit us on D's Place. That's D''Z Place Facebook page, or you can Twitter me at Real Talk Happens, or you can visit us on YouTube. And so again, we thank you for tuning in, and see you next time on D's Place.